Hello and welcome to Believe in Purdue. It's Friday, and I am Sam Sprunger. I'm joined by Grant Flora. Grant, a big weekend coming up, but a big game in Washington, in Seattle, on Wednesday night. That's all I've got.
Yeah, no, that was it was an interesting game for sure. I feel like a lot of the things we talked about in our preview on Wednesday,
Yeah.
we started to see kind of both the negatives and the positives. We saw the negatives in the first half, the positives in the second half. So
Yep.
it was a doozy for sure. But boy, I was very, very happy to see Purdue respond the way that they did. End up having a pretty comfortable win by the time it was all said and done.
They were down by double digits. Great Osabor, if you remember, I even mentioned. Well, maybe I didn't mention it the other night. The other times that I've talked about Great Osabor at Washington, I made the mention that he was at Utah State and Purdue was letting him shoot threes because he was like shooting 13%. He went into the game shooting 13% on threes and went 5 for 5.
Yeah, no, that was crazy. And I think he did go maybe 2 of 3 in their game before that I saw. Maybe that
Yeah,
was a different player. But like
you might be right.
he had made a couple of them, but I think they also said during the game he'd only made 4 on the season, and then he made 5 against Purdue. I feel like this is not the first time this has happened to Purdue. I feel like multiple times it's just, oh, this guy's made 3 threes on the year, and then he hits 2 or 3 against Purdue, and it's like, are you kidding me? Come on.
It's about right because it just seems like they're always getting everybody's best, and I guess that's a good thing, for the fact that means, if you're getting everybody's best, and it's not that everybody doesn't try all the time, but when you're playing the good ones, you tend to try to put your best foot forward, and we're seeing a lot of those best nights from people.
Yeah, and I think especially talking about like 3-point shooting from big guys, Purdue tends to play with a post player that's not going to want to come out and guard. So
Right.
it makes a little more sense that those guys would get those open looks and they're going to take them because they're there. So it's not completely unreasonable, but I think it is funny that that happens
Yeah.
multiple times. It feels like to Purdue.
Well, the Boilermakers put 4 in double figures against the Huskies. I tell you what, and we'll get back to the scoring breakdown and kind of the performance breakdown. I tell you what, 22 points in one half doesn't seem like that's a Purdue style. They were playing like they were the least motivated team in the world, and I think a lot of it has to do with a couple of different things of being on the road. Excuse me, being on the road, and then also being in such a time difference. I think they play like this against Oregon, they're not going to have enough to come back. So I think it works out in Purdue's advantage that they're playing Oregon on the tail end of the West Coast trip, for the fact that they'll. Not that there's a huge amount of jet lag, only 3 time zones, but there's enough that maybe that was just throwing them because they were playing at 9:30 at night, which was actually 6:30.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think that this game kind of helped get them adjusted and a little bit accustomed to what things were going to be like.
Mm-hmm.
And luckily, it was against Washington, a team they were equipped to deal with. And now they get to go against Oregon. Hopefully, they've kind of figured things out. They know they have to bring that level of intensity
Right.
from the opening tip because I think they were fortunate to be down just 8 at halftime. If I'm being honest, the way they played, just nothing was going right. You talk about a few different things. They had some major passing issues in that first half. They had some wide open guys near the hoop where they got the play they wanted. They just couldn't make that pass.
Yeah.
And then they missed their looks from 3. Obviously, 0 of 6 in the first half was pretty wild. Just little things that go right when they're playing at home or they're playing in Gainbridge Fieldhouse that just were not going right in Seattle.
Yeah, and I mentioned that Purdue had 4 in double figures. Washington only had 2. Great Osabor with 28, and then Makai Mason had 12 for the Huskies. So, and then after that, Grant, nobody scored more than 6 for Washington. So Purdue did a fabulous job in, okay, well, I guess if two people are going to score double figures, that's fine. We're going to get nobody else even close to double figures, while we're going to put some points on the board. Now, CJ Cox didn't score any. So he goes from 23 one night, or the last time out, to none the next time. Braden Smith scores 17. He only has 5 assists, and he has 4 turnovers. Like that, so this was not the utmost best game that we've seen from some of the Boilermakers, and they still came away with an 11-point win, and they went on a 20-2 or 20-4 run to get basically to the point where they were up by 11 and just kind of cruised along the rest of the way.
Yeah. I had a 21-6 run to start the second
21-6.
half.
There we go.
I had in the first half, they had Purdue as a team had 4 assists on 10 field goals, finished the game with, I believe, 9 assists as a team on a combined 25 field goals. You know what those numbers were against Nebraska? 32 assists. That's like the most they've had, I think, in a game roughly 20 years, if what I saw was right, on 41 field goals. Complete switch. Their offense just wasn't flowing. They still, I mean, obviously they didn't score as much, but 9 assists total for the team when Braden Smith averages about that by himself.
I think he averages 8.9 a game.
Yeah.
And for him, for the team, so this, while this was an 11-point win, while this was 6 in a row, while Purdue has done a fantastic job keeping the opponents to a very low scoring average during that streak, this was a little concerning of, I guess not concerning, but indicative that they're still kind of trying to find who they are. Everybody's going to struggle. We get that. But you can't have the whole entire team struggle at once.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And that's exactly what happened that first half. And like we said, I think going against Oregon on Saturday, tomorrow, which we'll get to later this episode, they have to be the second half Boilermakers in this game the entire game just to have a chance, because Oregon, not only are they playing at home where Purdue's on the road like we talked about, but Oregon's a very tough team in their own right.
Well, they're I believe they're coming in at number 13 in the polls. Purdue's at 17. So it's a close matchup in rankings, but there's an obvious advantage when you're at home over the other. I know Oregon wouldn't want anything to do with going into Mackey Arena. You know, just like Purdue doesn't want to go into, is it Phil Knight Court? Whatever they play at in Oregon. It's definitely an environment that I'm trying to think. It's probably gonna be, I guess, true road game. Probably their most intimidating place to play, venue to play right now, up to this point. Now they've got a trip to the Breslin, they've got a trip to Assembly Hall, they've got places to Chrysler. Yeah, they've got places to go that are going to be intimidating. But at this point, Oregon's going to be their toughest one. But to put a fine point on the end of the Washington game, what did you see though that gave you the, hey, this is what we've been talking, that's what we needed? Kind of what was your highlight, I guess?
Well, there are a couple things I could go to. One was, once again, Purdue forced turnovers. I think there were 17 Washington turnovers over the game. That's what kept them in it the first half. They had 7 turnovers, but Washington had like 9 or 10. They forced more than what they gave up, and then they kept it going in the second half. So that was really big. The intensity flip from the first half to the second half. And then Fletcher Lawyer down the stretch had a critical charge that he took with about 2 minutes, which is questionable on whether it was actually a charge. It looked a little bit softer than the usual charge.
Tomato, Grant.
He was in position. He was in position no matter what. It's just whether or not the guy was actually pushing him. But he was there, and that's what we're talking about here. And then he came down the next possession and drains a 3 that pretty much iced the game. When he had, did they have a scoreless first half? It was close. It wasn't. He didn't have much.
I think he might have been scoreless. If he didn't, he had maybe one bucket, and that was it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I feel like as Fletcher Lawyer goes, Purdue goes. Like Smith, PKR, they can have good games and Purdue can still potentially get beat. But when Fletcher's on, Purdue really is tough to guard.
Yeah, and I've likened Purdue to the 2016 Cubs and Braden Smith being Dexter Fowler, which was as you go, we go. But I could see an argument for Lawyer being that too, because like you said, Smith and TKR can both have really good games scoring wise, but they don't do or they Smith does a great job but doesn't score a lot. If Lawyer's scoring, Purdue's in a very good position to win ball games.
Yeah, yeah, and like Smith's the same way. I mean, if Smith isn't having a good game, Purdue's going to struggle. But I feel like Smith has been more consistent even throughout his career, like last year and this year, whereas Lawyer has had his stretches of struggle, and when he has gone through those, Purdue as a team has struggled. So I guess it's more of a thing where their big three have got to be on. If one of them's not on, then Purdue's folded.
Yeah, oh, for sure. And a big game. We talked about Caleb first as well. He got the start, had a big game. He scored 15, 6 rebounds, 4 for 4 from the field, 7 for 9 from the line, and a partridge in the pear tree. And I think he even swept up the locker room after they were done, because it just seemed like he was doing everything. And I tell you what. He had 4 steals too. That
I was about to just mention that.
Yeah. So like the game he put together after we'd just gotten done talking about him being a big holdover from last season. I don't know if maybe we see him start to emerge as a more constant starter, because he's got that senior leadership, and guess what? He's not too shabby of a basketball player either.
Yeah, we're seeing the Caleb Burst that we saw like his freshman year, the first half of the season, and maybe his sophomore year, which I've been really looking for because I really like Caleb Burst as a guy and as a player. Right. And I thought it was just really unfortunate kind of what's happened to him these past couple of years, just with Purdue having a loaded front court and so forth. So to see him finally emerge and get back to that, it's really good for him. It's also really good for the team with where they're at right now.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to go ahead. We're going to step away for a break for the audio podcast. Just keep watching if you're on the stream. But we're going to take a quick break for the audio podcast. You're listening to Believe in Purdue on the Believe and Lounge Sports Network. All right, let's get back into it. Let's talk about the Boilermaker trip to Eugene to take on the Ducks. It's Saturday. 3:00 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I believe it's on NBC. If I'm wrong, I apologize, but I'm pretty positive it's on NBC. But
that's what I remember too.
We teased it a little bit just a couple of minutes ago there, Grant. If Purdue decides they're going to play like they did in the first half against Washington, they'd better hope that they're playing just as hard a defense to keep Oregon playing like they did at Washington, like Purdue did at Washington. Makes it close.
Yeah, and that's going to be pretty tough because Oregon has a really strong offense, probably one of Dana Altman's best that he's had there. They had 6 players in double figures against Penn State in their last game. And the leading scorer of those 6, I think, had 17. I think it was Shellstad with 17. And they had 6 guys that were in double figures on an 82-point night, which 82 points, not low. But if you have 6 guys in double figures, usually you're probably looking more at 90 to 100. So that was really impressive. It shows that they have a lot of guys that are going to come in and be threats. Purdue has to be able to handle all of these different guys that could go off. And Shellstad and Biddle are their 2 leading scorers. Shellstad's only averaging 12.5 on the season, but his last 3 games, 23 against Maryland, 24 against Ohio State, 17 against Penn State, he has gone 12 of 16 from 3-point range in that 3-game stretch at 75%. He's going to be tough for them to guard.
Yeah, Jackson Shellstead was actually, I believe, he was a preseason first teamer for the Big Ten. He was in that grouping with Braden Smith and a couple. I know it was Braden Smith because he was the Player of the Year, preseason Player of the Year. But Shellstad was expected to be big, and he's finally starting to come around. I think it took him a little bit to get going, but honestly, he didn't need to. You've got a bunch of different, like you just went through and said they've got five that average double figure, or and they put four in double figures. Or no, wait, I'm sorry, six in double figures is what it was against Penn State, and yeah, a 15, a 17, a 13, an 11. Like they didn't have anybody that scored over 20 points. I mean, over 17, and I think that just means that they distribute the ball. I think that makes them even more of a dangerous team because you could have a team if six of them could put double figures on, guess what? If four of them do and the other one puts up 25, we're looking at the same type of output. So if you shut one down, another one can blow up, and I think that's the danger of the Ducks, especially this season. Like you said, Dana Altman's got a loaded team this year.
Yeah, it makes them a tough scout, which is
Yeah.
not great for Purdue because they have 2 days to scout them coming off a Washington game. They have to go to Oregon. They're already kind of a little out of sorts because they're on the West Coast. Hopefully they're
Mm-hmm.
settling in, but you're still away from home. You have to go in and try and scout this talented team that also has a lot of different weapons. And it's gonna test how well Purdue can adapt and how quickly they can learn, which I think they can, because again, we're talking about a team that has a lot of guys, 3 starters back from a team that made the national championship game. But on the flip side, you have Oregon, who hasn't played in a week, who's had a week to sit at home, scout Purdue, practice, and they're going to be ready to not only get a chance to beat a good team in Purdue, but a big time game that will have Big Ten standing implications.
Yeah, yeah, it's a uh this is I love I like Dana Altman. I like what he's done at Oregon, and I now hate it because now my team's got to go play there. It just is. It's so frustrating because when they were in the Pac-12, I didn't have to worry about not. If I saw them play against Purdue, meant we were playing in the tournament. It didn't. It now it's in the middle of January on a cold Saturday afternoon. I've got to go watch my team play yet another top 15 ranked team. And oh, hey, by the way, it doesn't get a ton easier. Ohio State isn't after that, then Michigan. Like come on, give us a couple of games. It just doesn't get easier. It just doesn't get easier.
Yeah, I'd say these last couple of weeks are probably the easiest portion of the schedule in the Big Ten Purdue's going to have. And they've fortunately taken advantage of that by getting their wins. But you got 2 games against Michigan, 2 games against IU, at Michigan State, at Illinois. You're going to have big games every week or two. And then you're going to have other teams that you think you can beat that are still going to pose problems that you can't overlook. And if you do, they're going to make it pay.
And that's why I've said with this year's the way the things are panning out this year, don't be surprised that Purdue goes into the tournament with 7 losses, and they've only got 4 now. Like there are plenty of games that they could end up getting beat, and this one is every bit of one that could be that way. Like I've said a couple of times, and you agreed with. They play like they did the first half at Washington. They're in trouble on Saturday. But you know what? They play like they did in the second half against Washington. Then Oregon's in trouble. This Purdue team, and you've been around long enough to see it. I've definitely been around long enough to see it, to where no lead is comfortable. So when you're up 20, you want them to be up 30. And when they're up 30, you want them to keep going and get up 40 until there's literally barely any time left, because then it can't collapse. That's me as a Cubs fan, though, too, personally. Patience with this team, because we're starting to get into that. We got the backloaded tough schedule, too. just like Michigan State did.
Yeah, for sure. Another thing I like to highlight about what could be interesting for Purdue to guard, Shelstad and Biddle are the two top scorers, like we talked about. Biddle is a 7-footer in the paint who could pose problems on the inside because Purdue unusually lacks height and size in the post this year. But he's not a traditional post-up guy necessarily. Now, they might do more of that since they have the size advantage, but he can come on the outside and he's going to shoot it well and he can move well. So Shelstad and Biddle like to play this little pick and pop sort of action where it's kind of like what TKR and Smith do, except instead of TKR rolling to the rim, it's Biddle popping out for a 3, which is going to be tough, I think, for TKR and First to guard whoever they end up deciding to put on Biddle because they have to step out. And if they step out and contest that 3, Biddle could potentially drive. It's just not a style of basketball I think that Purdue's used to playing.
Yeah, well, that's a tough and I was hoping that Will Berg would turn into something like that to where and don't get me wrong, I think he's a redshirt sophomore, so he still has some time at Purdue as long as he wants to stick around. But I always thought I've seen him be versatile enough to where he can shoot, and if he gets a defender that comes out. So, yeah, I agree. Biddle's the difficult one. You know what you're getting with Shelstad. You know that you're getting a good solid 17, 20 points out of him or you have that expectation that he's going to average something around there. Biddle, while I didn't even see what his overall team average for the year was, but he's putting up pretty decent number, 13.7 a game. I mean, that's not bad, but with him being the size that he has, and if he's got a mismatch, he can make people pay. And that's I think that's what you're touching upon of being such a difficulty in trying to guard him, because who do you pick? Because if you put the quicker First, he's going to get posted up on. And if you put the slower TKR on, he's going to get stretched out and driven by. It's a difficult matchup for them.
And maybe this is a game that we see Painter throw in Will Berg for a few extra minutes to
I thought you were going to say play a zone, and I'm like, oh, you don't know.
No.
Will Berg could make some appearance, I think.
I mean, who knows? But another thing I would highlight about Biddle, too, he's getting 1.8 blocks a game.
Yes.
And now he's going to be guarding TKR, who's a great post player, but he's also 6'8", 6'9", give or take. And Biddle's I think a pretty legitimate 7 feet tall. He's got 3 or 4 inches on him. A guy who's already a decent shot blocker. That could be tough for TKR to deal with offensively. And if they don't have that post game going, it really eliminates a lot of what Purdue likes to do.
Well, I'm going to sound like a broken record, because I think if you can get any sort of a strong presence, be it First, TKR, and Braden Smith at the rim against Oregon, I think you open yourself up to a lot more opportunity at winning. If they're going to pass it around the arc and struggle to get good shots, good looks at the rim, it could be a really long afternoon for us watching them play in Eugene. But I really do think if Smith, TKR, and First, I'm going to say First because I'm going to assume he's going to start. I don't know that he is. I haven't seen a starting lineup, but I would say those 3 get a presence going offensively and defensively, not necessarily dominating, but at least having a presence. And pulling Biddle away from any sort of, if Smith comes in and pulls in the defense and Biddle comes to try to take him out, he can maybe dump it off to TKR for a dunk, or, oh, hey, they collapsed around me, I'm going to kick it out to Fletcher for a 3. It's very, to me, similar to what I thought they needed to do against Rutgers, is get the presence at the rim.
Yeah, for sure. And I think this is a lot of what happened in that Washington game, actually, was they got a lot more vertical action to the rim, whereas in the first half, it was more of that passing around the arc, getting some 3 looks, but they didn't fall. And they just kind of didn't get a whole lot. Smith was forced to do a lot on his own, where in the second half, we saw that 2-man game with TKR where Smith could make that pocket pass.
Yes.
TKR was knocking down that little mid-range floater or spraying it out for a 3. And it's going to take that same thing against Oregon, except it's going to be harder because Biddle could be looming in the paint. Also, these Oregon guards, they're not big. Most of them are 6 foot, 6'1", but they're quick and they're athletic, which is going to make it tough for Fletcher Lawyer. Even guys like CJ Cox, who is athletic himself, but he's a freshman. And if he's not quite ready for it, they could turn the ball over. They could just get out of rhythm where they're taking some tough shots. And so if they don't execute correctly against this Oregon defense, they could struggle offensively as well.
I mentioned, I've talked about it. One of the main reasons why Purdue lost the national championship game last year was because UConn had enough in the post that they didn't have to double down on Zach Edey, which then allowed the other 4 to stay onto their men, and they were athletic enough to prevent open shots. Braden Smith couldn't get to the hoop and draw any doubles. UConn was not doubling. UConn is the absolute exception to the rule. Most of the time, if you're getting good penetration and getting to the rim, you're going to start pulling those guys away from the outlier shooters. That's why I think it's essential. I think you're right. Oregon's more athletic. Their guards are more athletic. But I don't think that they're at the UConn of last year's level of athletic to where they don't have to double down at any point. So I think if the guards can get penetration to pull in that's where you're popping it out to the arc and getting some open shots with Fletcher, with Colvin, maybe some kick out to Heidi, and all of a sudden they close on him and he explodes to the hoop. Something like that. I think Purdue has a lot more offensively the danger over Oregon, but I worry that too many of them go cold. That's the only kind of thing that I run into.
Yep, I would agree. And you mentioned Camden Heidi. It would be really nice if he could find his shot in this game because he has not been shooting it very well these last few games. And he is a really big difference maker for them when he's on from 3, when he's slashing to the hoop. I think he had 2 points against Washington. That was actually a pretty big bucket. It was an offensive rebound and a putback for him. But it'd be nice to have some more consistent production from him off the bench. I think Purdue only had 6 bench points, maybe.
I've gotten so many windows open that I think I closed the one that's had the. I did. I'll be darned. I think you're right.
Outside of
right.
the 4 starter, outside of the 4 double-figure guys, they only had 6 points. That includes Cox, who had 0. So, it'd be nice to see Colvin and Heidi come in and be able to produce a little bit more as some athletic guys that can knock down a shot and maybe even drive to the rim.
Well, it's going to be an interesting game to watch to see which Purdue team shows up at the tip and then which one finishes out. So hopefully it's the Washington second half for both halves against Oregon. But it'll be interesting and exciting as Purdue always makes it every time we watch them play. All right. Well, that brings us to the end of today's Believe in Purdue. Monday, we will have the reaction to the Oregon game. Hopefully it's a good reaction. Just saying. And we will also preview the Boilermakers game against Ohio State on Tuesday. But Grant, thanks again for going on this adventure. This has been fun, and it's only getting more fun, not funner. Funner is not a word. It's more fun, So thanks again, and thanks to everybody. Catch us on social media. I'm at SamSprunger1 on the platform formerly known as Twitter, and I think Grant's eventually going to get Twitter. I'm not sure. I don't know.
We're working on it.
We haven't even we don't know, but no. Thanks so much for joining us on Believe in Purdue, and we'll see you next week.